Hare Krishna. My name is Krishna Kirti Das, and I'm going to make a few comments on the video recorded by Praghosh Prabhu in explanation of his resignation from ISKCON's governing body commission. The issue involved in this is regarding a senior leader of our movement and spiritual master who 30 years ago inappropriately touched a young girl, and whether he should continue to be an initiating spiritual master. So there are two sides of this. On the one side is that there's a group of people, not just Praghosh Prabhu, who believe that he should resign. Unequivocally, he should not accept any more disciples, if not also leave ISKCON entirely. The rationale, this is Praghosh Prabhu read from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's explanation as to why he would not meet King Maharaj Prataparudra. So he says, Shukla Vastre Masi Bindhu Yaiche Nalukaya Sannyasira Aupachidra Sarva Lokagaya. As soon as the general public finds a little fault in the behavior of a sannyasi, they advertise it like wildfire. A black spot of ink cannot be hidden on a white cloth. It is always very prominent. And this is the rationale that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave for not meeting Maharaj Prataparudra. And so Praghosh Prabhu quotes this, he refers to this, and which is appropriate. You're supposed to cite Shastra when you give a reason for why, you for doing anything. And on the other hand, another group of devotees, they quote Bhagavad Gita, Apichet Sudaracharo Bhajate Mam Ananyapak Sadhareva Samantavyaha Samyag Vyavasito Hisaha. That even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. So, there's a rather long purport here, but by Srila Prabhupada, but the purport is clear that there are two things. One, even if one has committed the most abominable activity, then if one goes on in this devotional service, that itself is the atonement. So what do we do in this situation? We have conflicting statements, in the Shastras. On the one hand, sannyasi, if he has any great fall down or something like that, then he should he should not be a sannyasi anymore. He should go away. And then on the other hand, we see that anyone, someone is a saintly person and he has a fall down, an accidental fall down, then he is supposed to he's supposed to continue engaging in devotional service, and that itself will purify. In fact, so what do we do in this? How do we resolve this? So in this regard, the proper way to do this is that you can't just choose one. The principle is that you can't just choose one statement from the Shastra and ignore the others. You have to satisfy all the conditions of the Shastra, because the Shastras, which are given by the Lord, are perfect. So, in this regard, I want to read Lord Krishna's statement to Arjuna in the punishment of Ashvatthama, son of Dronacharya, and the Prabhupada's purport. Quote, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna said, a friend of a Brahmana is not to be killed, but if he is an aggressor, he must be killed. All these rulings are in the scriptures, and you should act accordingly. You have to fulfill your promise to your wife, and you must also act to the satisfaction of Bhima, Sena, and me. Purport. Arjuna was perplexed because Ashvatthama was to be killed as well as spared according to different scriptures cited by different persons. As a Brahmana Bandhu, or worthless son of a Brahmana, Ashvatthama was not to be killed, but he was at the same time an aggressor also. And according to the rulings of Manu, an aggressor, even though he be a Brahmana, and what to speak of an unworthy son of a Brahmana, is to be killed. Dronacharya was certainly a Brahmana in the true sense of the term, but because he stood in the battlefield, he was killed. But although Ashvatthama was an aggressor, he stood without any fighting weapons. The ruling is that an aggressor, when he is without weapon or chariot, cannot be killed. All these were certainly perplexities. Besides that, Arjuna had to keep the promise he had made before Draupadi, just to pacify her. And he also had to satisfy both Bhima and Krishna, who advised killing him. This dilemma was present before Arjuna, and the solution was awarded by Krishna. So the solution, next verse. Sutu vacha Arjunaha sasagyaya harirhardam atasina manin jahara murdhanyam dvijasya sahamurdajam. Suta Goswami said, just then Arjuna could understand the motive of the Lord and by his equivocal orders. And thus, with his sword, he severed both hair and jewel from the head of Ashvatthama. Purport. Contradictory orders of different persons are impossible to carry out. Therefore, a compromise was selected by Arjuna by his sharp intelligence, and he separated the jewel from the head of Ashvatthama. This was as good as cutting off his head, and yet his life was saved for all practical purposes. Here, Ashvatthama is indicated as twice born. Certainly he was twice born, but he fell down from his position, and therefore he was properly punished. So, what are we to take away from this? It's, in this particular, with regard to the incident of the senior leader, and any such incident, actually, is that you can't just take one statement from the Shastra or one statement from the Acharyas and run with it, and then ignore all the rest. You have to take both. You have to satisfy all sides. You can't just satisfy one of the sides. So, so in this regard, the what Praghosh Prabhu has recommended is a one-sided solution. You know, he should be banned. He's not fit to carry on with his duties and so forth like that. But that would contradict Bhagavad Gita 9:30. But another takeaway from this is that how did Arjuna arrive at the solution? How he arrived at this solution. Arjuna's sharp intelligence is he took shelter of the Shastras. So the Shastras, Srila Prabhupada mentions Manu Samhita. So in the Manu Samhita itself, this is chapter 8, shloka 379. It reads, Monyam pranantikam dando brahmanasya vidhiyate itaresham tuvarnanam dandaha pranantiko bhavit. Dansa has been described as the death penalty for the Brahmana. For other castes, the penalty would be actual death. And there are further statements in this regard. I'm skipping the Sanskrit, but the translation, verily he shall not kill the Brahmana, even though he be steeped in all crimes. He should banish him from the kingdom with all his property and unhurt. And finally, the Brahmana Tad Puyan Adharmo Vidyate Bhuvi Tasmadasya Vadam Raja Manasapi Nachintayet. There is no greater crime on earth than the slaying of a Brahmana. The king shall therefore not even think of his death in his mind. So these are the standard rules of Dharma that a king like Arjuna would have known about. And therefore, by taking shelter of the Shastra Vidhi, he could find the proper solution that would satisfy all sides. So that's why Bhimasena, when Arjuna did this, he didn't stomp off and resign or anything like that. He said, I'm going to quit the Pandavas because Arjuna did this. He accepted it because this is a Shastra Vidhi. So in this regard, with regard to the incident of 30 years ago and an initiating spiritual master inappropriately touching a girl, it was that was it. The incident didn't go beyond that. There wasn't a rape. It was an accident. But still, accidents happen. There's the story of Vaishampayana. He was one of the disciples of Vedavyas, and he also had committed a Brahmahatya, actually killing a Brahmana. And the reason that happened is because he's one of the 7 rishis, one of the Sapta rishis, and there was an agreement among them that if an important meeting was convened at Mount Meru, that all of them had to be present, and whoever did not show up would be visited by the sin of killing a Brahmana. So what happened is that they called the meeting, he didn't show up, and then within a week, he accidentally kicked the son of his sister and thereby committed Brahmahatya, and so he had to atone for that. So one of the things that then after that happened, Vaishampayana, he asked his disciples if they could perform some atonement on his behalf to atone for that sin. Yajnavalkya, who was one of his disciples, the famous author of Yajnavalkya Smriti, he said, why depend on these other weak and useless brahmanas to atone for your sin? I'll perform a great tapasya, I'll perform a great atonement, and there's no need to ask anybody else. So Vaishampayana, he reprimanded his disciple. He said, how dare you... So Vaishampayana reprimanded his disciple Yajnavalkya and ordered him to give back all the mantras he gave him, the Vedic mantras. And so Yajnavalkya vomited those mantras, and so the other disciples of Vaishampayana, wanting to get those mantras, turned themselves into partridges, because as humans they couldn't eat vomit, but as partridges they could. And so those mantras later became known as the Taittiriya Upanishad, because the Titri, this is a partridge. But anyway, the point here is that even for Brahmahatya, Vaishampayana he was not ineligible to continue performing his duties as an acharya. In fact, his disciples even performed performed some atonement, some prayaschita on his behalf for that. So anyway, so that's Brahmahatya, and in this case we have an inappropriate touching a girl. I don't think that that rises to the level of killing, so manslaughter, or killing somebody. So it would not be appropriate in this case to also to say that this leader is ineligible to continue performing his duties as a spiritual master, that he's no longer eligible to perform it. So so you have to satisfy all sides. And in this case, the GBC decision apparently has been to request Maharaj to no longer continue with certain duties. I don't know the exact wording of that, but he's not. But on behalf of the society, nonetheless, he's still allowed to. He's still allowed to continue on with his duties as a Diksha Guru, including the acceptance of new disciples. So this is the GBC resolution does seem to. It's not official yet, but at this point, it's not unreasonable. So what do we make of this? I mean, the final thing is that, just to revisit the decision Arjuna took with regard to Ashvatthama, ultimately you have to take shelter of the Shastra Vidhi and not just some Shastras and then reject others or ignore others. You can't do that because the Shastras are perfect. You have to understand it in such a way that all the conditions are satisfied, even if they're contradictory or they seem contradictory. Just one last comment. When Srila Prabhupada was having his public debate with Professor Stahl, because the university that Professor Stahl was teaching at wouldn't let devotees give class or preach there. And so they had this public debate, and one of the points that Srila Prabhupada made to Professor Stahl was that it was the same thing. Srila Prabhupada was saying it's the Sankirtan, it's the holy name, it's the Yuga Dharma. And Professor Stahl said, well, I can quote some other Shastra says this and that and other things. And finally Prabhupada pointed out is that the unauthorized interpretations give a rupturous appearance to the Shastras, that it's inconsistent. But it's only the bona fide paramparas that actually are able to harmonize. They're actually able to reconcile all these seemingly contradictory statements and give the right opinion. In fact, this is actually what the definition of Vyavahar, which is law in Sanskrit, means. The sage Katyayana has given the analysis of the different syllables of the word Vyavahar. So Vya, the first syllable, means many. Vibhina, there are many different. Va, the second syllable, means doubt. And Hara, as in Hari, Hara means takes away. So Vyavahara literally means that which removes many kinds of doubts. So that's what the law is supposed to be. So when we deal with law, there's a great science to interpreting law. It's very vast. And if we're going to run a society, we should learn it. So one of the fundamental points about interpreting Shastra or law, because in Vedic law, the law comes also from Krishna. The Dharma Shastras, Vedas, and so forth. They're all to be considered. That one has to understand the Shastras in such a way that they don't give a rupturous appearance, that it's not inconsistent. So Praghosh Prabhu's conclusion, he did the right thing by quoting the Shastra to back up what he's saying, but what he failed to do is he failed to reconcile it with all these other statements that give some other opinion. So the way to go forward is to follow in the footsteps of the acharyas, just like Arjuna did. We need to satisfy all the conditions, all the contradictory statements. And the resolution doesn't mean I can pick one and run with it. No, you have to satisfy all of them. Hare Krishna.